So I mentioned that there was some new faces on the defensive side of the ball, and we'll get to those guys in a little bit, or that guy. But there's an old face on the defensive side of the ball that, thank goodness, he's still around.
Why don't you clarify that old comment? Because Mike Elston doesn't live too far from us, so
you're right about that.
And he's a big dude. I don't want him showing up being upset that somebody called him old, and I'd probably get blamed for it. So
that's fair. Your name's on the product, so
yeah.
No. I meant old as in tenure. We'll say the most tenured face on the defensive side of the ball, and that's Mike Elston. He's the defensive line coach, and now he will resume his role as the recruiting coordinator as of recently. So,
and also will be the run game coordinator.
Correct, on the defensive side of the ball.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got 3 different hats to wear now as a defensive coach. And so let's talk about Mike Elston, why this is a big year for him. And I personally, it's a big year for him because of these new roles. I'm very interested to see what his influence is on the run game from a defensive side of things, and how, maybe that defensive line gets a little bit more involved in the run game, and just what that means. What is his fingerprint, going to be on this run game defensively? And then, look, we know he can recruit. We know that Notre Dame was very successful when he was the recruiting coordinator. Personally, I am in no way worried about him being the recruiting coordinator. I think it keeps his focus on the field where he wants it. I'm excited about it. I think I think that recruiting office is going to take yet another step. And so I think that's a good thing that he's in charge of it again.
Yeah, from a recruiting standpoint, at the very least, Notre Dame is just going to continue doing what they've ddone.
Sure.
From a recruiting standpoint. I think when you look at some of their better years in recruiting, I do think Mike Elston was involved in that from a recruiting coordinator standpoint. And hopefully he'll be able to build on their recent success and start bringing in more top level talents. And when I say top level, I don't necessarily mean it has to be a top 50 ranked recruit. There's plenty of guys that aren't ranked. I mean, Nolan Ziegler's a guy that right now is not a top 250 player, but that's the kind of dude you win championships with. I mean, the film to me tells a different story. Ryan Barnes is a 3-star recruit. That's the kind of guy you can win championships with. It's more about the talent, more so than the rankings. But sometimes those two things are going to go hand in hand.
Yeah.
So obviously you want to see that. But for me, the challenging thing for Mike Elston more than anything is it's not so much a challenge from a difficulty standpoint or a concern standpoint, but just a challenge of one of the things that excites you as a football coach is when you have to kind of take a brand new group that's going to look a whole lot different than the one you had before and then mold it. And I think that's honestly, that can be some of the funnest parts about being a coach is like, look, we lost Dalen Hayes and Julian Okwara and Khalid Kareem and Adetokunbo Ogundiji and Jerry Tillery and all these guys that were part of that rotation for so many years and were so successful. They're all gone now. So now it's about building that next wave. And I think that's where your reputation as a coach really develops. Because let's be honest, and this is in no way a criticism of Mike Elston, but the success he's had the last 4 years has been primarily built around the same players.
That's fair.
Over the last 4 years, Notre Dame's best defenders were some combination of Jerry Tillery, Julian Okwara, Dalen Hayes, Khalid Kareem, and Adetokunbo Ogundiji, right? And now they're all gone. Now you have some returners like Kurt Heinisch and Myron Tagovailoa, but they're not the future high-level draft picks. Kurt Heinisch playing at his very best this year, and he was very good in 2020. He had more tackles for loss in 2020 than he had the first 3 years of his career combined, and he's always been a rotation player. It's not like he never played before, and this was the year he came out.
Yeah.
But he's not going to be a first-round pick. He's not Jerry Tillery.
He's just not. He is a fantastic college football player, and he knows his role, and that you need guys like that at every level. You need guys like that at the high school level. You need guys like that at the college level. You can build championships off guys like that. There is no question about it. But the reality is he's not going to get his name called on the first day of the NFL draft.
He's just not that difference maker type of talent. He's a guy you want, you love. It's no way a criticism, but he's not a difference maker in that regards. In that, like, he's going to go out and have 10 sacks this year.
Right.
Myron Tagovailoa is not that guy. At least he hasn't shown to be that guy. Both good football players, but they're a different type of veteran than you're used to building around, where in recent years you've been building around guys that, in my opinion, were high-level draft talent. I still believe, if not for injuries, Julian Okwara and Khalid Kareem, who were a 3rd and 5th round pick respectively, would have been drafted even higher.
Sure.
And Khalid Kareem was drafted in the 5th round, early in the 5th round. And that was with an offseason in which he did nothing as far as draft prep because of the shoulder injury. He couldn't run, he couldn't lift, he couldn't do anything except interviews. Well, you and I both know that Khalid Kareem probably would have impressed people enough to go up at least another round. And the same thing with Julian Okwara, who could do nothing. I mean, he couldn't test 40, no 40, none of that stuff because of the injury he suffered late in the year.
Yeah.
So, and then now Dalen Hayes and Adetokunbo Ogundeji. So, I mean, you had, like, to me, legit NFL players that you've built your defense around, and it's been mostly the same players. Well, your veterans now are not that high level of player. It's more of the, can you take that next wave and develop them?
Sure.
And if you can turn Isaiah Foskey into a big-time player and Jordan Botelho and Jason Adamiola and Riley Mills and those kind of guys, that's where you really make your bones as a coach on a national stage. And I think that's why Mike Elston, to me, still doesn't get the respect he deserves nationally. I think Notre Dame fans have started to really appreciate the job he's done for the most part. I don't think nationally he gets as much love as a developer of defensive linemen because, again, it's been mostly the same guys.
Sure.
And I think where you really make your bones is, like I said, when you do it with somebody else. So, like, if Clemson would not have won a second title with Trevor Lawrence, then it doesn't make Clemson seem as much of a premier program as much as it would have been like they got hot at that time, sort of like Florida State in 13 and 14. Florida State had like 2 really good years, and then before that and after that, they weren't a legit program. So you don't put them on the level of Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, teams that do it year after year. And so it's the same thing from an individual coach standpoint is, okay, you did well with those guys, but can you do that next group? Especially, I think the other thing that hurts him too is a lot of the guys that were successful weren't guys he recruited. Harry Heastan recruited Jerry Tillery. Keith Gilmore Keith Gilmore primarily recruited Khalid Kareem and Dalen Hayes. The only guy he really recruited was Julian Okwara. So I think there's a lot of things that go into this that, to me, this is where Mike Elston, if he can put another great defensive line on the field this year, his reputation nationally, I think, takes a big jump because it's a bunch of new faces that a lot of people nationally haven't heard of. Notre Dame fans are fired up about Isaiah Foskey. I don't know how many national people know about Isaiah Foskey. Notre Dame fans know about Jason Adamiola. I don't see him getting written about by any national writers about that next big time player at Notre Dame. So if he goes out there and puts another really good defensive line on the field, then all of a sudden he starts getting the credit that I think he deserves as a guy that's really done a good job developing defensive line. It's like every year, it's like this year, people are shocked that, I'm reading NFL analysts that are shocked that Dalen Hayes is really good or that Adetokunbo Ogundeji is really good. I'm even seeing Notre Dame fans surprised by that. Like, oh, he did really well at the Senior Bowl. I'm shocked by that. I'm like, because you're obsessed with sack numbers and you don't break down film the way a coach does, which is, are you impacting the game in every single way possible? And a lot of times it's not going to be that sexy, flashy sack thing. And so you're like, well, gee, where did that come from? You're seeing Kareem, Okwara, Hayes, Ogundeji, all these guys. Only one of those guys was considered a big-time recruit, and he wasn't even recruited to play defensive line. He was recruited to play linebacker.
Right. So
that took some coaching. And I think if you can now do it with Foskey and Botelho and Adamiola and Mills and all those guys, now all of a sudden your reputation takes off. And so I think that's what makes this a big year for Mike Elston is I think he could really start getting some respect. And then that helps his reputation from the standpoint of now maybe he becomes a more coveted coach when it comes to maybe some head coaching opportunities that I think ultimately he wouldn't like to do. And and I'm not saying like at Michigan when Jim Harbaugh's gone, but opportunities that maybe might be attractive to him, because ultimately that's what you want in it for your assistants, is you want them to reach the pinnacle of their goals and objectives.
Of course.
And if Mike Elston stays here as long as Brian Kelly does, I'm not going to complain about that. But if he gets that head coaching opportunity, then I know for him and his family that would be something that'd be tremendous. But it's going to take him really dominating this year from a coaching standpoint to really put himself on the level of respect that I think he deserves. So that's, to me, what makes it a big year for him. And honestly, Vince, what makes me nervous when I'm talking about a team is when you use the word if a lot, right? Because more often than not, all the ifs don't hit, right? You're going to miss on
absolutely.
some.
Yeah, no doubt.
But the higher, and there's a lot of ifs about the defensive line this year. If Myron Tungavaloa gets used to playing strong side, if Jason Adamiola lives up to his potential, if Riley Mills is ready to have a sophomore surge, if Isaiah Foskey is as good as we think he is, if Jordan Patelho can kind of take that jump and be a really dynamic rotation player, all of these ifs are involved in the success of the defensive line. I will say this, however, if at least 4 of those 5 ifs
that's a lot. It's a big, it's a pretty big hit rate there, pal.
If that happens, this defensive line could, to me, be even better than it was the last couple of years.
Right, I agree, because I think it'll be deeper. I think it'll be deeper, and that's saying so. Well, I shouldn't say deeper.
No, I think deeper is a correct word. Okay. It's more of a. To me, it's not so much the depth aspect of it that changes it. It's this group has more playmaking potential.
Okay.
Than what we've seen in past years. So you're almost combining sort of the playmaking you had from Artillery with more dynamic edge playmaking ability, especially at Viper. So that's kind of where I'm coming from, is I think we could see the interior players making even more plays. And even Jerry Tillery in 2018, as good as he wasn't a great playmaker against the run. He was more of a great pass rusher. I think this group could be more. I think there's 2 types of tackle for loss. So you look at like a guy like Jerry Tillery, right? Okay. And he had that All-American season in 2018. And you look at it and you say, okay, that was a heck of a year. A defensive tackle that had, 10.5 tackles for loss. Mm-hmm. And I believe he had 8 sacks that year, if I remember correctly, 8 sacks that year, right? So that's really good production and got him some All-American nominations. Well, for me, I'd rather have a Sheldon Day type of defensive tackle. Sheldon Day in 2015 had 15.5 tackles for loss. He only had 4 sacks. That means the vast majority of his plays behind the line were against the run.
And run game,
so,
yes.
Right. And so, to me, I'd prefer that type of season from an interior player than what we saw from Tillery. And, again, what Tillery did was really good. It's just give me the great run plugger, the guy that can make plays behind the line. Give me a Sheldon Day compared to Jerry Tillery. And to me, that's what I think this interior has a chance to be, is more of those type of plays. And those are the type of plays I prefer, because a lot of times those sacks come in 3rd down or a long down situation where, it's a drive stopper. But to me, I really like the run stuff, because a lot of that stuff happens in early downs, and then that leads to the sack opportunities. And so that to me also then makes the linebackers a lot more effective, because you have to worry so much about not letting the interior defenders make an impact against the run. And now that lets the linebackers flow. So that's what I want to see this year. Is I want to see more production from the interior of the defensive line against the run.
Okay.
And if Elston can get them to do that, and I think it's possible, that's where I think you could see a big jump as far as just overall production to this line. And that's the challenge, in my opinion, that awaits Mike Elston this season.